Good afternoon, everybody. We're very, very pleased and grateful to have somebody of the caliber of Brigadier Hennie Heymans to come and talk to us about subjects which he's very, very passionate about and also very knowledgeable about. And I'm sure he's going to give us the most interesting and worthwhile talk and video display. So also welcome to everybody who's attended, and we thank you very much for your kind attendance, and I'm sure it's going to be worthwhile for all of us. Okay, well then I hand over to Hennie.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Goeiemiddag, dames en here. My talk is entitled Onherbenutte genealogiese polisiebronne voor 1949. So it's all about police archives and police material pre-1994. I have prepared this speech mainly in Afrikaans, and when I am, I will give English explanations as we go on. Navorsers moet verkieslik 'n grondige kennis van die geskiedenis hê voordat hulle met genealogiese navorsing begin. You have to have a very good grasp of our history before you get involved in genealogical history, or geological research. Today we are living in cyberspace, and everything is available by touching a button. But I have found that you've got to prepare yourself and get the correct catchwords and catchphrases and know exactly what you want to do, because everything is immediately available. But you've got to know where and when and how to look for this information. And then when you do research into police material, you've got to remember that there are various cultural differences between the various police branches. For instance, if you get information regarding normal police accident report, you will get the full particulars of the person and the particulars of the accident. If you get documents of the old police suspect staff, you will get far more information about the background of this person. And as I say, you've got to know the history. You've got to put your family pedigree on top of South Africa's history to understand it. To give you an example, a friend of mine came to me and he said, Hennie, for 6 years, I cannot find my grandfather. I said, what was the date? He said it was just after the Anglo-Boer War. I said, I've got an answer for you. He was in jail. He said, good grief, my grandfather. I said, take the sociological circumstances into account. It's after the war. Everybody is impoverished. How do you make money after a war? You can sell liquor, you can sell diamonds, smuggle in gold and things like that. And he was not very keen when I told him the story. And after about 3 months, he came to me laughing. He said, you know what? I visited a distant cousin. And she said to me, has my husband ever told you how his father arrested your grandfather? And then he told me the story that just outside of Heidelberg, on the road to Verlies, his grandfather was arrested for smuggling in diamonds. And this policeman had a bicycle, and they lifted one another to Verlies, and that night the policeman slept in the cell with his prisoner and left him the next day, and a few days later he went to court and he was sentenced to 6 years for smuggling in diamonds. And that is why Oupa was never in the pictures of Oma's funeral or any other weddings and things that took place. The other thing that you've got to do is you must never be put off when you are doing research I did a lot of research on the Dutch police system, and a detective in the Dutch police system is called a rechercheur, nothing but a researcher. And my relatives come from the Netherlands, and I got my whole, ek het my hele stamboom from the Heymans that landed at the Cape, but beyond that I don't have anything. So I've just got his father, and I got this Heymans' mother, and I googled her and I got a lot of information on her. So you must never be despondent, you must just carry on. Now, as I've said, you've got to look at the psychological, the economical, the constitutional, the socioeconomic, the security, and the psychological circumstances in the country when you're doing research. You've got to know that the French Huguenots arrived here in about 1688. You've got to know the British settlers came in 1820. You've got to know that a rebellion took place in 1914. There's a vast amount of literature available on persons that were arrested. You see, I'm a policeman out of passion. I love police work. I love to work on night duty at the police station, because you could open the archive and you could take out dockets and you could read murder dockets and old dockets that are filed there. And there's a vast amount of information and a vast amount of knowledge in these old files. And it never stops. What is the main purpose of police work? It is to be the activities of people, the acts and the omissions of people. And all these things are reported. We are interested in the movements of people. In the old days, talking about 1900 to 1920, 1925, policemen were stationed at railway stations, the South African police, only to look at which known criminals are arriving in Pretoria or Johannesburg or Durban or Cape Town. We had a form called VI-55. It is the Department of Interior. When you leave the country, you fill these things in. We had in our archives, I was also for a long period of my life attached to the security branch. We had lists and lists of people leaving the country by boat, and we had passenger lists of people coming in. And all these lists and things we checked it against known criminals and known people of security interests, smugglers and things like that. So the police has got a vast amount of information. And in the old days, remember, I'm only speaking prior to 1994, we even had a couple of policemen stationed permanently in the Department of Interior. If we were looking for Phil Beck, we can say, listen, look in the files for a certain Phil Beck that lives more or less in Cape Town. And he would go and look through the forms C25 cards, and he would see, okay, here is a guy that's possibly, or here are 3 guys. So all these records are in the various archives. And travel information. Now we've advanced, we are flying by aircraft, and things are done electronically, and it's so easy today to see when the man hands in his passport to see, oh, he's on one or other stop list or anything like that. Now, the first thing when you do research, it's like police work. You've got to go and sit down and you have to think intelligently, where are you going to get this information from? Like, let me just give you an example. It's easy to be a policeman, it's difficult to be a civilian. But once we had a complaint from a certain address, and that these people were purportedly to be of security interest, and we only had the address, and the inquiry was given to me. So while I was brushing my teeth, I said, how can I find out who lives there? And the most simple solution was to go to the municipality, to take my ID and to say at the lights department, who's paying the account at that address. So this is, you've got to be creative when you are doing research into your family. And there was this famous author, Sun Tzu, who said information does not come from the gods. You can't pray for information from the gods. There are only three ways of obtaining information. There are only three sources of information: covert sources, overt sources, and technical sources. Now, where did we as police get information from? If we had to do research, background information to certain people, we took into account books, authors. We looked at spies, we looked at contacts, we looked at agents, we looked at family, friends, colleagues, journalists. Even bar stories give you a point to start. So there is so much written, and then you must know what is available and what is not available. And today, with a new act on privacy, you've got to be very tactful and very careful when you do investigation. You've always got to be, you must always be lawful, and you must always remember other people have a right to privacy. So think like a researcher, like a researcher, like a police detective when you are doing your research. Now, take the police and take the defense force. When you see a soldier who's a family member, or you see a policeman, he's normally in uniform and he's got a number of ribbons on his chest. That is his curriculum vitae. And you can see when you inherit your grandfather's medals, you can see his number is engraved on the side of the medal, his name, number, and rank is there. So, and there's always a reason why he's carrying a certain medal. And there's always paper. Follow the paper trail. I've been saying it for years. I donated my whole archive to the University of the Witwatersrand. I had such a lot of information because I say that paper is patient. Keep paper. And in today's life, we've all got computers. Open folders, and all the information you get there, put them in. You never know when you're going to use this information. Now, the South African Police and its predecessors and the Union Defence Force and the South African Defence Force had what we called force orders. Now, in these force orders, you would find, for instance, the following information. The attestation of members of the South African Police or of the other forces. I will mainly, when I say South African Police, it also includes the other forces. The attestation of members were pre-1950 always mentioned. These 35 people have joined the police. Here are their numbers, their names, and their particulars. Then there's another very important police document. It's called the police list. The polisie list written in Netherlands. It gives you the whole country who was in the employ of the South African Police on the 1st of March or the 1st of April 1916. You can see if this man, you can see when he joined the South African Police or antecedent police forces. You can also see whether he could speak English or Dutch. You can see from his force number whether he was a tall, big man, because then he would be in the foot police. And if it was a small man, you could see he was in the mounted police. So you can see various things. You could see whether he was the post commander, the station commander, whether he was an orderly at the district surgeon or whatever. You can get a lot of information from the police list. Also, we saw in our police orders, when somebody is killed, There's every force order that comes out starts with the deaths, and the commissioner says, I regret to announce the death of the following, and then he gives the names of the people that have died and where they have died. Also, promotions were announced in the force orders, and also when people were commendated or got medals, the whole story is in the force orders, how brave this man acted or whatever he did. Even sport achievements, very mentionable, mentionable sport achievements were published in the various force orders. From 1907, the Natal Police in the colony of Natal had the Nongai magazine. And in 1910, the Union of South Africa was formed and the South African Police was established in 1913. And all the forces in South Africa voted and they said no, they would like to have the Nongai as their regimental magazine for the whole of South Africa. So the whole of the Defence Force, the police, then the prisons and the railway police had the Nongai as a magazine up to just after the Second World War. In the Nongai was various articles, various things that people did that were good, uitstaande prestaties, mentions in dispatches, commendations, and all these kind of things were published. Now, another source where you could get information is to go to the police archive. In the police archive, you find old nominal rolls. Who joined the South African Constabulary? Who joined the Transvaal Police? Who joined the South African Police? Who were at certain places at certain times? Then you find very, very interesting files on people, suspect files. You would find, for instance, I could remember when I was in the security branch, there was a very, very old file on Tom Andrews, who's a very, very important labor leader. He came to the attention of the ZAPs. He came to the attention of the Transvaal Police and ultimately came to the attention of the South African Police. All these papers were kept, and it was very, very interesting going through these old documents. You must remember, I told you that the police are interested in people. As jy bekend of berig is, het die polisie van jou geweet. People like, for instance, Bram Fisher. We had photographs of him, and we had whatever he did was in our old files. Then the police had files on people trading in illicit liquor. We had files on diamond smugglers. You must know that the diamond detective branch lasted up till the 1990s or the late 1980s as a continuous branch. From Kimberley, they were transferred to Pretoria and they amalgamated with the gold and they became the gold and diamond branch. But old smugglers and all these people, their files and their records are there. Then we have, as I said, the suspect files of the ZARPs, of the Geheime Dienst, of the Transvaal Town Police, the South African Constabulary, and various other police forces. Then, during 1939, a lot of people, Afrikaners, were interned. They were mainly also by brandwag. They were against the Second World War. The South African Police sent Captain Jan Taylor to go to the then Southwest Africa, and there he obtained information and he obtained a list of 4,000 Nazis, people in Southwest Africa that were Nazis. The police then took this information and went in 3 trains full of policemen to Windhoek, and all these German Nazis were arrested, and the police prevented a putsch. They wanted to give Southwest Africa to Hitler on his birthday. I think his birthday is the 20th of April or the 20th of May 1939. They wanted to present this to him. They also arranged with a German ship to come down to assist them. But this was foiled by Captain Jan Taylor, and he changed the course of World War II. All these files of these people that were interned is paperwork. There are lists. In the security branch, those files of the people that were interned were unfortunately destroyed because I wanted one day to have a look at them. They were destroyed. Now, if you know where to look, this is very, very interesting. I spent a couple of days in the UNISA's archive to look at the United Parties documents. And there I found the most interesting stuff. Correspondence to Sir Theodore Truter, who was the first Commissioner of Police and was later the Director of Internments. I also found documents there of Dr. E.G. Malherbe, who was the wartime head of military intelligence. The military authorities were very, very worried about the Broederbond. They were very, very worried about the Osaba Brandwacht. I'm not a politician, I'm a policeman, but I read these things because they were so interesting, because they were describing a part of our life in South Africa. And there are many names that you can pick out and see, oh, your grandfather was there, or what the case may be. For many years, we published the Police Gazette, the Polisie Courant. And it was so interesting, again, back to my young days as a little constable sitting at King's Rest in Durban. I would take the Police Gazette and read them. Very, very interesting. There were photographs of people that were wanted by the South African police. There were photographs of unidentified corpses. There were all the movies that came out. Now I'm digressing for a minute, but I can remember that in 1952, where a lady appeared in a bikini, that little part had to be cut out of the movie, and the police had to make sure that if the film was shown in Durban, that piece had to be cut out. But in the 60s, where a lady appeared in a bikini without the top, that had to be cut out. They could appear in bikinis. So you can get a lot of research just looking at what our attitudes and moral stance was in those days. Like in Durban, for instance, under the city bylaws, you couldn't drive a car without a shirt. And if you were apprehended by the Durban City Police, there was paperwork, and there's always paperwork, and there's always an archive. Then, as I said, we had the Police Gazette. Then we had an album with about 4,000 to 5,000 people who were freedom fighters, who were terrorists, who left the country, who received training abroad, and we knew who they were. So that is just a source of information. Then we had a suspect album of white people, of any color people who were suspects in criminal cases. Then when you come to the police archive and you're interested in the forebearer who was in the police, dan kan jy altyd 'n uittreksel uit sy diensregister kry, of jy kan 'n kaart kry wat sy loopbaan weergee en watter stasies hy by gestasioneer was. Jy kan kyk na aanstellingssertifikate. You've always got to keep your eyes open for a good story. You've always got to keep your eyes open for a document that comes your way. The other day, I spoke to people and I said, you know what? Near the Wynberg police station, we picked up a bundle of pocketbooks that were chucked away. And they gave this to me, and I went through the pocketbooks, and one of the famous detectives, it was his pocketbook when he was a sergeant. Speaking of the terrorist album, somebody asked me, because I publish a police magazine every month and a police and national security magazine every month. And they asked me for certain information, and I said, where did you get that? They say a police station at Komatipoort chucked these documents away, and we picked it up. So you've always got to be wary, be aware to gather information, because you never know when you are going to use such information. Then, as I said, there are so many places where you can get information. There are decided cases. The moment a case appears in court, it becomes a public document. All the documents attached to that case, police exhibits, police photographs, everything becomes part of a criminal case and is in the public domain. And you can do research on any criminal case that you are interested in. Very, very interesting thing. I sat in the archive here in Pretoria many days and looking at treasure hunting. In the old days, if you did hunting on treasure, Kruger pounds and things like that, you had to take a policeman along, and he usually sent a report. And it was very interesting to look at these skatjagte that they had. Another thing is, after the Anglo-Boer War, the South African Constabulary of Baden-Powell had to verify claims set in by the Boers because compensation was paid. It's a very useful source of information. Another very interesting information source is police patrol reports. In the old days, the mounted police patrolled the area, the rural area. He visited farms. He had to write down each farmer's name, the farm's name, and he had to write the report, whatever the farmer reported to him. Likewise, there are old Landros reports, old magistrate reports. Each magistrate's court has got a diary where important things were annotated and where you can get information from. You must remember that the police did so much duties. They had to look for tax, wheel tax, marriage licenses, and all those things they had to check. A very interesting, humorous little thing I read in the old Natal Police magazine. This mounted policeman came to the farmstead and he said, "Good morning, Mrs. van der Merwe." She said, "Good morning, Constable." He said, "Have you got where is your wheel tax for that ox wagon?" She said, "No, my husband went to town today to get the license." He said, "And your marriage license, where's that?" He says, "He also went to town to fetch the marriage license." So you can see there's a lot of humor sometimes in police work. As I said, there is such a lot of information available. My great-grandfather was a member of the Bethlehem Commando fighting against Britain in the 1899-1902 Boer War. And there was a Hansapper. I don't want to give his name. He had a gang called the Class Gang. They, for instance, murdered my great-grandfather and the neighbor on the farm. My great-grandfather was with General Prinsloo's commando, and they were traveling from Pretoria, where President Steyn had come to greet President Kruger, and they were waiting near the Brits area when the British came, and they went over the Magaliesberg Mountains. Very interesting story. I don't want to digress. But on the way to the farm, he got permission to visit the farm because my great-grandmother was going to have a baby. And on the way to the farm, they were murdered by this gang. Now, it was so interesting. There is a paper trail because there was a Constable Fourie who investigated the first murder case that happened to the Mosters next to my great-grandfather's farm. And you could see that the magistrate, Mr. Rosenweich, issued a warrant to visit the farm and to do the investigation. There's always a paper trail, and it makes it so much interesting when you do your family research and you get this information. Now, information and data is always looking us in the face, and we've got to recognize it. You can go to various police monuments. Just think about the police memorial on the southern eastern corner at the Union Building. Every policeman that has died, his force number, his rank, his name, and the date of his death appears there. There is such a lot of information. There's a ZOP memorial. There's a Cape Police Memorial in Kimberley. There are various Natal Mounted Police memorials in Natal. There are various graves and grave sites that you can visit. There are Heroes Acres, and there's such a lot of information. And then, as I said, you've always got to be wary. I have found a lot of information in old magazines, like the old Huisgenoot, the old Outspan, the old Personality, Scope, Lantern, SA Digest, SR Oorsig. The Bureau of Information has published various yearbooks with a lot of information. And then we've got that we as policemen use. There's a lot of official records that you can go to. There are voters' rolls, local, provincial, national voters' rolls. There's the Field Cornet and the Landros. They've got documents. There's Defence Force. You've got to register as a burger. There's immigration forms and immigration forms. There are census forms. There are claims against the department. I spent many interesting hours reading claims against the state. And one of my grandfather's brothers served in the war in Southwest against the Germans in the First World War, and he lost a halter of a horse, and it was worth 5 shillings. The government instituted a claim against him for that 5 shillings, but it makes history so much interesting if you can get this. Also, accident reports are available, as I said, or think of the dossiers that you can look in at court. There are many things that you can do. Then there are telephone registers and telephone books, and there are official telephone registers that give you a lot of information. And then a very interesting thing, we had a Constable Eagle who was a Red Indian, First Nation Canadian, served in the Transvaal Police, and while on patrol, he had an encounter with a lion. His horse bucked him off, and the lion jumped on top of him, and he got hold of the lion at the nose and pushed the lion away from him, and with his other hand, he shot and killed the lion. He was taken to the hospital at Elim, where he died 10 days later of blood poisoning. Now, mentioning here, you can find the hospital report of this unfortunate Constable Eagle who died with his encounter of the lion. Then I've learned something that I never knew before. But when I was the district commandant in the Free State, in Welkom, the Welkom area, all people that worked in mines and died, their lungs had to be sent to to Johannesburg, to the Thesis board. There are so many interesting things. You've got the ongevallenkommissaris. If you can get the reports in the archives. Then, after the murder of Dr. Verwoerd, the vetting became a new buzzword, and thousands of people were vetted for certain jobs. Like, for instance, if somebody wanted to work at Sasol 1 or 2 or at Krijgkor or wherever, a form Z204 was filled in with a wealth of information. And then I say, you won't get hold of it, but I could get hold of it and see if somebody had a criminal record. Then you've got other things like driver's licenses. You might find an old driver's license of your great-grandfather in the cupboard somewhere. Never throw these things away. Or old green ID cards, C25 cards of people at the Department of the Interior. In the police archive, you can find lists of people that were going to the border or were going on various courses. I don't want to carry on and bore you, but there are so many things. Police photographs of crime scenes that you also can get in at the magistrate's court. And then we come to unofficial documents. Something that we used in the police was brabies. It was a thick book, say for instance on Johannesburg or on Durban. Each street was there with the name of the people living at the addresses. So you could go through brabies and see who lived in Bluff Road or whatever on a certain date. These things were a wealth of information, and I have bought many of these old brabies registers at various flea markets and things like that. And then one thing I forgot to mention is that there were government lists. It was a book of lists. Who's the magistrate at Cathcart in the Cape, and who was his constable, and how many money did they get? That was a very, very interesting book. I have forgotten the name of that book, but I will think about it and I'll let you know. Then there are various specialized books, like Terry King's book on gallantry awards to the South African police. These things are very, very interesting. And then you know this, that you can get sterfkennisgewings, university yearbooks. There are quasi-legal things, many, many interesting things. And then I want to sort of come and give you a few surprises. You know, you're very naive if you're 17 years old and you're a member of the police. And as you get older, you get more wiser and you get more cynical sometimes. And you find out the most interesting things because you are working with people's lives. You find out that the priest has 3 or 4 children. You find out that somebody's father is not his father. The poor guy's been paying maintenance for 20 odd years, and he wasn't the real biological father. Or sometimes you think that B is the mother of A, but B is the sister of A, and that the grandmother has only pretended to be the mother. There are very strange situations when you do genealogical research. I just want to say this in Afrikaans. Partykeer is jou ma, nie jou ma nie. Jou ma is eintlik jou sister. Jou ma, wat jy dink is jou ma, is jou ouma. And they bring him up as a laatlammetjie to save the family's honor. And then we've had cases where people have gone to the border and the wife committed adultery and she became pregnant. In one case, I know this poor unfortunate guy wanted to divorce his wife, and the welfare officer came and he spoke to the couple and he looked at this unfortunate guy and he said, but this kid looks like you. So this unfortunate guy says, well, Captain, if you say it looks like me, I won't divorce it and we'll carry on. And this is an example where I say, your father is not really your father sometimes. And we had a very humorous case where a brown soldier came and he worked it out that his wife was also unfaithful, but she had twins. And he broke down the house, and the police sergeant was very tactful when he attended to this disturbance. And he asked what was the problem, and the soldier explained to him, he said, my wife has been unfaithful and we've got twins. And he says, now, how long does it take for a baby to be conceived? And the guy said 9 months. He says, well, this is twins. How long do you think that takes? He said, oh yes, 18 months. So he was quite happy with 18 months and the marriage was saved. Now, what do? I personally do. I open folders on any person that I think is related to me. How distant, it doesn't matter. And I am doing my patriarchal and my matriarchal line. I just can't stop doing the research on all my families. And I identify photos. That's very important because once people have died, you can't identify these people. And I get the genealogical particulars as soon as possible. And I've done a matrix of the history of South Africa and a matrix of my family, and I superimpose the two so that I exactly know who comes from where. And it's very, very interesting. Some of my family's people that I'm interested in is my Heymans family. My mother was a Milan. My grandmother was a Boer, Erasmus, De Pre. So I'm very, very interested in all these families. And then there are people in my family that I can't identify that come from Wales. They were Thomas and they became Afrikaans Tomasa, and you can't find any further information. Then I know I've got Brown family in the Cape, but it's very difficult to trace them. And what I want to end off in Afrikaans and say, wat is die uitdagings vir die toekoms? Ons moet ons horisonne verbreed. Die diaspora van die Suid-Afrikaner is aan die gang. Meer en meer van ons mense ook in Suid-Afrika trou oor die kleurscheidslyn. I've got many friends whose children are married to, for example, to Indian people. I've got it in my own family, where my distant cousin living in America, his daughter is married to an Indian person, very, very highly educated Indian people. But this is the reality, the new diaspora of the South Africans. And we've got to look at these things. It's so interesting. Dear Pam, dear Phil, dear Miss Griffiths, I'm finished with my little speech. I prepared it in Afrikaans, but when I looked, I saw there was a lot of English people. So on the cuff, I just changed my speech from Afrikaans to English. I hope you found it interesting. And I tried to be accommodating by speaking in English. It's not my first language.
I just wanted to first say that how fascinating I found that. Really, really interesting. And thank you very much for all the English that you put in. I really appreciate that. And it was really so marvelous because you switched from English to Afrikaans so fluently and fluidly. I wanted to ask, you mentioned the rebellion of 1914. Was that the miners' rebellion or another rebellion that you were talking about?
Thank you for the question. The first thing is the miners had three strikes. First was in 1913, then in 1914 there was a miner and a railway strike, and then in 1922 there was the Red Revolt on the Rand. The rebellion I'm talking about were the Boers under General de Beck and other people who rebelled against Louis Botha and Jan Smuts. And for instance, I'm till this day still looking for the names of 12 policemen, South African policemen, that were shot by Commandant Joppie Fourie at Nooit Gedag. So that is the rebellion that I'm speaking about.
Okay. Thank you. Because the police were also involved in the miners' strike, weren't they?
Yes. Yes, I have it is now been a century ago, and I have published 3 special nongais. I have revived the old Natal Police magazine, being an Italian myself. So I've revived it, and I've devoted 3 special nongais on the Red Revolt on the Rand. It is a fascinating period of our history. If you just bear with me for a moment, what puzzles me is here are miners who get a very, very good salary striking. And here comes the police and the defense force, and they try to subdue this strike. Why didn't the police and the soldiers have sympathy with the miners and join them? I don't know. I'm looking at that just from an interesting point of view. Why didn't the police and the soldiers side with the miners? If you understand, if you look at this, but it was quite a serious conflict.
Yes.
Nearly 80 policemen and soldiers were killed.
Yes. You speak about having written about them. How can one get hold of that? I'd be very interested.
I will send. I know Phil, and I know Phil from when he was living in Boksburg, and we were friends here in Pretoria. What I will do is I will send the link to my magazines to Phil and the website where we publish these. On the one website, you can look at the magazine and you can read it. On the other, and it's very well set out on the one. On the other website, it's not well set out, but you can offload the magazine if you want it. And I believe that history is like manure. You must spread it around to make things grow. I don't worry about copyright. I respect other people's copyright. But my work, as long as you can use it, as long as you give the Nongai acknowledgement.
Are we able to access them in any way?
About half of those sources are open. It takes a lot of time and a lot of planning to get information that you are looking for, because a lot of police information you can also get in the archive. I'm talking about the South African National Archive here in Pretoria. There's a lot of police information. There's a lot of case dockets. Another interesting thing is, if you know, the police authorities at this moment in time is not paying too much attention to our police museum and to our police archive.
Hennie, I came in very late for your talk. However, I've got a question regarding my great-grandmother's mum. She died in Swellendam, and on a death record, it says the Landros did an inquiry because she died in an accident. So I wondered, you talking about these documents being available, what is the route that I take now in requesting that Landros investigation, if there were any?
Yeah, that is where you start. You said Swellendam. You start with the magistrate's office in Swellendam. Ask them, do you have an inquest on such and such a person born in such and such a date? Or if they don't, it might be in the archive in Roelandstraat.
Hennie, that was an amazing talk. Thank you very, very, very much. Really, on behalf of all of us. I think you've lit a light under all of us again to start looking at other things that we overlooked or didn't even think about. So thank you.